There is a very specific, almost universal feeling that I think we all experience. It usually happens on a crisp, completely ordinary morning.
Oh, yeah. I know exactly where you're going with this.
Right. So picture this. You are standing at a checkout counter in a local cafe. You can feel the warmth of a cardboard sleeve wrapped around an artisan coffee, and the heat is just slowly seeping into the palm of your hand.
It is a very cozy, mundane moment.
Exactly. There is that ambient, comfortable hum of conversation in the background. You hear the sharp hiss of the espresso machine steaming milk, the clatter of ceramic mugs, and then the digital total comes up on the little glowing screen facing you.
The moment of truth.
Yeah. And in that split second, as you hand over your card to pay or, tap your phone against the terminal, there is this subtle, almost imperceptible tightening in your chest. It is a literal biological reaction.
It really is. It is a microcontraction of the nervous system. You feel your jaw clench just a fraction of an inch, and your breathing gets just a little bit shallower.
Yeah. It is like
Yeah.
bracing for an impact.
Exactly. It is a bracing for impact, disguised as a totally mundane daily transaction.
That is the perfect way to describe it, because there is a silent arithmetic happening entirely within your nervous system. In that fleeting moment, you aren't just exchanging currency for roasted beans and hot water.
No, not at all.
You are actively experiencing the physical sensation of a resource draining away from you. You feel a sense of loss.
Right. And that tiny fleeting moment at the coffee shop, where it actually points to a much grander, broader human confusion that dictates an overwhelming majority of our waking existence.
I totally agree. We live in a society that operates on a perpetual treadmill.
Oh, an endless treadmill.
Yeah, we expend a monumental magnitude of physical effort, pushing ourselves to the point of utter bone-deep exhaustion. I mean, we pour our absolute maximum physical energy into our daily lives, and yet an endless tide of us walk around feeling like our internal reservoir is perpetually empty.
It is exhausting just thinking about it. We are taking relentless, grueling action from the dawn of the cycle until we literally collapse into bed.
So the fundamental question we have to answer for you today is, why does that sheer, undeniable force so rarely yield a proportional harvest of abundance?
Well, it is the great tragic paradox of the modern human condition. We have been conditioned, essentially from the moment we can comprehend language, that physical action is the sole engine of reality.
Right, like just work harder.
Exactly. We hold on to this deeply ingrained assumption that if we just push harder, run faster, sweat more, and sacrifice our peace of mind, the mechanics of the universe will eventually reward us with a life of ease and security.
It is like we treat life like a giant lever. We just assume that raw physical torque is the only way to move the heavy machinery of our circumstances.
But the foundational mathematics of that approach are profoundly flawed. It completely ignores the underlying mechanics of how a lived experience is actually constructed.
Which is exactly the mission of our exploration for you today. We're going to transition entirely away from that exhausting illusion.
We really have to. It is a trap.
It is. So today is an intimate, deeply reflective journey into the architecture of your own existence. We are going to completely upend the conventional understanding of how a life is built.
And we will explore the physical world you can touch, see, and measure is actually just a trailing shadow of something much, much more powerful.
Yes. We will look at how altering our foundational internal resonance, our fundamental vibratory state, is the one and only true architect of the life we experience.
But doing this requires a profound dismantling of how we instinctively view the world around us. To begin, we have to establish a core assertion that, well, it will sound deeply counterintuitive at first.
Yeah, lay it on us.
The physical realm that we navigate every single day, the realm of the checkout counters, the concrete office buildings, the traffic jams, is just a solitary fragment of total existence.
Just a tiny piece of the pie.
Right. It is the overwhelming minority of what is actually happening. To put it in perspective, the physical world is, in essence, the realm of materialized, frozen imagination.
Frozen imagination. Oh, wow. I hear that phrase and it paints a really fascinating picture.
It is a striking visual, isn't it?
It really is. It implies that the solid structures around us, the things we bump our shins against, they used to be completely fluid. They used to be pure thought or energy, and now they have just hardened into a rigid place.
That captures the essence perfectly. And this is exactly where humanity makes its most exhausting mistake. We equate physical action with true creation.
Because that is all we can see.
Right. But creation does not happen on the physical plane. Creation occurs entirely, completely, on the mental and internal planes. The physical world is merely the arena of effects.
So it's like the printout of a document that was already typed.
Exactly.
Hmm.
When you try to change your life circumstances by simply taking frantic physical action like working more hours, aggressively networking, or furiously rearranging the external pieces of your life, you are trapped in a cycle of absolute futility.
You are attempting to change an effect by manipulating another effect.
Precisely.
Wait, I need to challenge this immediately because this runs contrary to everything our culture teaches us about grit and hard work. Let me bring up a visceral memory to ground this.
Go for it.
Imagine being on your hands and knees, scrubbing a kitchen floor with a stiff, bristled brush. Your knees ache against the hard linoleum, your knuckles are raw, and the water in the bucket is turning this murky gray color.
A very clear, very physical picture.
Yeah, that is undeniable physical labor, and it is tightly bound to an immediate physical outcome, a clean floor.
Right.
Or think about endlessly typing on a keyboard, your shoulders hunched, churning out a massive financial report. If I brush my teeth with physical force, I get clean teeth. So if applying linear physical logic works flawlessly for those mundane tasks, why wouldn't applying that exact same physical logic to our grandest ambitions yield the corresponding result? I mean, shouldn't hard work equal profound wealth?
I see the logic, but you have to distinguish between maintaining the illusion and altering the foundation of the illusion.
Okay, explain that.
Physical action does not forge a new reality. Action merely serves as the midwife. It is the facilitator that allows a pre-existing internal frequency to be birthed into the physical world.
The midwife, not the creator.
Exactly. Let's look at your floor scrubbing example. Yes, the action cleans the floor, but the action is contained within a predetermined reality where you are the one who must scrub the floor.
Oh, I see.
Right. If your internal frequency has not fundamentally changed, the frantic action you take will only ever birth more of the exact same reality, no matter how hard you scrub or how fast you type.
So I just end up with more dirty floors to clean tomorrow.
You will just find yourself trapped in a loop of maintenance rather than evolution.
Wow. So if action is just the midwife, then the baby, the actual reality we're about to experience, is already conceived, formed, and determined by our internal state before we even lift a finger to act.
That is exactly it. Let's use a natural analogy that brings this into sharp focus. Consider the relationship between a heavy block of ice and a cloud of steam.
Okay, ice and steam.
On a fundamental chemical level, they share the exact same essence. They are both water. The singular variable that separates a rigid block of ice from an expansive, boundless cloud of steam is the intensity of their vibration.
The vibration of the molecules.
Right. Reality, the physical world you are interacting with, the bills you pay, the job you go to is the heavy frozen ice. Your internal state, your consciousness, your frequency is the limitless, expansive steam.
Okay, so following that logic, when we are exhausting ourselves with endless physical labor, trying to force a better life through sheer willpower.
You are violently hammering a solid block of ice with your bare fists.
Ouch.
Yeah. You might chip away a tiny, insignificant fragment here or there. You might manage to pay off one small debt or secure a minor promotion, but your hands will bleed, you'll be utterly depleted, and the massive block of ice remains essentially unchanged in its overall structure.
Because hitting it doesn't change what it is.
You cannot reshape the fundamental nature of the ice by attacking it physically. If you want to change the ice effortlessly, you do not use a hammer. You change the ambient temperature of the room.
You alter the vibratory rate of the steam.
Exactly. When you elevate the temperature, the ice simply melts. It becomes fluid. And once it is fluid, it takes whatever entirely new shape you desire without a single bruised knuckle.
That reframes so much of human struggle. We are spending the vast majority of our lives bloodying our knuckles against the ice, completely ignoring the thermostat on the wall.
We really are.
But to actually adjust that thermostat, we have to look at the mechanics of how a thought becomes a thing. I want to trace what we can call the multidimensional cascade of reality. There is a silent, perpetual flow to manifestation, right?
Yes, there's a very specific sequence of events that happens behind the scenes before the ice ever freezes.
Yeah.
It's a precise sequence. To understand your power as an individual, you have to map out this cascade.
Okay, where does it start?
It begins at the absolute source, which is frequency. Your frequency is your foundational vibratory baseline, the sum total of your internal resonance.
So frequency is step one.
Yes. From frequency, this energy flows downstream and downloads into your intuition. Intuition literally translates to your inner teaching or your internal guidance system.
Okay, frequency to intuition. Then what?
That intuition then generates subtle, quiet mental nudges in your everyday life. Those mental nudges are the impulses that inspire your physical actions. And finally, those physical actions solidify and harden into the ultimate outcome reality.
Frequency, intuition, mental nudges, action, reality. So if we look at that chain of events, reality is literally the absolute end of the line. It is the exhaust pipe of the vehicle.
It is the final, smallest domino to fall in the entire chain. And here's the crucial mechanic that researchers studying human potential continually observe. The closer an element is to the source, which is frequency, the more monumental its power to shape the outcome.
So reality itself has no power.
Zero inherent power to create. It is just the residue of the cascade. The tragedy of the human condition is that we spend our brief existence trying to manipulate the final domino.
We try to force the physical pieces to move rather than simply tilting the massive towering domino at the very beginning of the sequence.
Exactly.
Okay, let's ground this cascade in a real-world scenario. If our intuition is essentially pulling data from the server of our frequency, then it acts like a search engine.
That is a great way to look at it.
If the source server, our foundational state, is calibrated to a life of scarcity, to a life of just barely getting by, what does that mean for the intuition we experience daily?
It means the server will only dispense mental nudges that subtly, relentlessly guide you to perpetuate your own scarcity. It physically cannot download information from a different server.
Because it doesn't have the password, so to speak.
Right. You are locked out of the abundant network because your hardware is tuned to the frequency of lack.
I want to explore how these nudges actually feel, because I think a lot of us walk around assuming our daily decisions are completely rational and based on logic. Let me offer an analogy to see if this tracks.
I'd love to hear it.
Imagine you are driving home from work. It is twilight, the streetlights are just buzzing on, casting that orange glow. You are approaching a major intersection. You can take the deeply rutted, familiar path, the road you take every single day, past the same gray buildings, sitting in the same predictable traffic.
Very relatable.
Right. Or suddenly you feel this quiet, almost magnetic pull to take a completely unfamiliar turn to the left, a route you never take, winding through a giant neighborhood. How does our internal baseline dictate that seemingly random pull at the steering wheel?
That driving scenario perfectly illustrates the invisible filtering system of the mind. We only receive guidance from the reservoir we are actively tuned to. There is a physiological mechanism at play here, a filtering network at the base of the brain that determines what information reaches your conscious awareness.
So it filters out what doesn't match our baseline.
Exactly. If a person is operating from a baseline of limitation, if their frequency is calibrated to endless struggle and threat detection, their intuition is effectively blind to the infinite pathways of abundance lying just out of sight.
So in the driving analogy.
In your driving analogy, the person operating from scarcity will look at that unfamiliar left turn, and their mind will instantly generate a rational-sounding reason to avoid it.
Oh, like, I shouldn't go that way. It might be closed.
Yes. They will think, no, there might be construction, or I am too tired for a detour, or that road looks too dark and confusing. Their mental nudge operates defensively, guiding them safely back into the rutted path of their existing reality.
Because their intuition is just doing its job. It is faithfully executing the commands of the scarcity frequency. It is keeping them safe within the known bounds of their current limitations. It perceives the unknown as a threat.
That is exactly what is happening. But imagine if that same person had fundamentally altered their internal frequency to one of expansion, curiosity, and abundance. Their intuition would download a completely different set of operating instructions.
So the nudge feels different.
Totally different. When they approach that exact same intersection, the nudge wouldn't be masked as fear or fatigue. It would manifest as a spark of curiosity. They would take the left turn.
And what happens on that unfamiliar road?
On that unfamiliar road, their expanded perception might notice a for sale sign on a commercial building that sparks a life-changing business idea. Or they might stop at a different cafe and strike up a conversation with a person who completely alters their career trajectory.
So reverse engineering a life of abundance requires starting at the very beginning of the cascade. You have to change the frequency that dictates the intuition that dictates the slight turn of the steering wheel.
You have to.
This brings us to the most vital question of our entire exploration. How do we actually change that source server? Because, I mean, frequency can sound like a very nebulous, mystical concept. It sounds like something you have to sit on a mountaintop to find.
I hear that all the time. But it is not mystical at all. It is entirely structural. We can break down the construction of a person's foundational frequency into 7 distinct pillars.
7 load-bearing columns.
Exactly. These are the individual threads that, when woven together, create the tapestry of your vibratory state. They are perception, emotionally charged thoughts, beliefs, conviction, expectation, focus, and attention.
We need to unpack every single one of these because skipping even one feels like trying to build a house without a complete foundation. Let's start with the first pillar, perception. We often think of perception as just passively looking at the world, like a camera recording a scene. But it's much more active than that, isn't it?
Far more active. Perception is not a passive recording. It is an aggressive biological filter. Your brain is bombarded by a staggering magnitude of sensory data every single second. To prevent your nervous system from short-circuiting, your brain simply deletes the overwhelming majority of that information.
Just deletes it?
Just deletes it.
Yeah.
And what does it choose to keep? It only keeps the data that perfectly matches your pre-existing internal model of reality.
Wait, really? So we literally don't see things that don't match our beliefs?
Yes. If two individuals walk down the exact same busy city block, one carrying a frequency of threat and lack, the other carrying a frequency of opportunity, they literally experience two different physical realities.
Because their filters are different.
Exactly. The first person will only perceive the aggressive drivers, the litter on the street, and the scowling faces. Their brain edits out everything else. The second person will perceive the vibrant storefronts, the subtle architecture, and the friendly nod of a passerby. Perception is the bouncer at the door of your reality, and it only lets in evidence that proves you are right about how you feel.
Wow. That completely flips the script. We don't believe what we see. We literally only see what we already believe.
It is a closed loop.
Which leads directly into the second pillar, emotionally charged thoughts. We hear the directive to think positive thoughts relentlessly in self-help culture. But just having a passing cold thought about being wealthy doesn't really seem to have any gravitational pull.
A cold, detached thought is utterly impotent. It is just passing mental static. It holds no creative power whatsoever.
So what gives it power?
For a thought to generate the gravitational pull required to actually materialize into physical reality, it must be ignited. It must be paired with visceral emotion. The limbic system of the brain must be engaged.
Ah, the motion is the fuel.
Yes, an emotionally charged thought, whether it is ignited by the radiant, expansive warmth of immense joy or the icy, suffocating grip of absolute panic, is what signals your environment to begin the process of materialization. Emotion is the carrier wave of the thought.
That perfectly explains why chronic worrying is so dangerously effective. Worrying isn't just thinking, it is actively visualizing exactly what you do not want to happen and supercharging that image with a massive, potent dose of emotional terror.
It is the worst thing you can do for your frequency.
Because when we worry, we are literally demanding that the unseen forces around us build our worst nightmare, and we are handing over the architectural blueprints along with the emotional electricity to power the construction equipment.
It is the ultimate misuse of our creative faculties. You are mobilizing your entire nervous system to prepare for a catastrophe that only exists in your imagination, and by doing so, you draw the probability of that catastrophe closer to your physical experience.
Let's move to the third pillar, which feels like the most invisible one, beliefs. If thoughts are the files on a computer, beliefs feel like the underlying operating system that we don't even know is running.
That's a perfect analogy.
But I have a real issue here. If beliefs are largely unconscious, how do we even identify them? If I consciously want to build a thriving business, but I have an invisible inherited belief that wealthy people are inherently corrupt, how do I fight an enemy I can't see?
You cannot fight it directly, but you can track its footprints. Beliefs are the deeply ingrained scripts that dictate your automatic reactions. They are often inherited from early caregivers or societal conditioning.
So we look at our reactions.
Exactly. You identify them not by analyzing your conscious desires, but by observing your points of friction.
Points of friction, what does that look like?
Well, when you hit a ceiling in your income, or when you self-sabotage a healthy relationship right when it gets serious, that friction is the collision between your conscious desire and your unconscious belief. In your example, if you subconsciously equate wealth with moral corruption, your nervous system will perceive financial success as a threat to your social survival and moral identity. It will trigger cognitive dissonance, and you will subtly, automatically dismantle your own success to stay safe and good according to that invisible script.
So we sabotage ourselves to protect our identity.
Yes, you change the belief, by first observing the self-sabotage without judgment and then intentionally inserting a new narrative.
Which feeds right into the fourth pillar, expectation. This one feels so quiet, so insidious in our daily routines.
Expectation is profound precisely because it hides in plain sight. Here is the absolute truth about expectation. Whatever a person finds entirely normal in their life is a quiet confession of their deepest unconscious expectations.
Oh, wow. That is a heavy realization. Whatever is normal is a confession of expectation.
Let that sink in.
So if it feels normal to check your bank account and feel a familiar wave of nausea and anxiety, if it feels normal that your car inevitably breaks down right when you finally save a little extra money in an emergency fund,
Then your foundational frequency actively expects struggle. You have normalized the chaotic frequency of lack. Your nervous system is comfortable in chaos.
and reality just mirrors that comfort zone back to us.
Exactly. The universe does not give you what you idly wish for. It delivers exactly what you expect. If you expect the other shoe to drop, reality will gladly unlace it for you.
Okay, let's bring in the fifth and sixth pillars together, focus and attention. Because I think people constantly confuse these with intention.
Oh, all the time.
I know individuals who have the most beautiful, noble intentions. They intend to build a richer, fuller life. They spend hours crafting elaborate vision boards. They meticulously write down their goals on the first day of the cycle, but their daily reality never shifts an inch.
The paradox of the vision board is a classic example of confusing intention with attention. Intention is a wish cast into the wind. It is pointing at a destination on a map.
Right, and attention.
Attention is the focused laser beam of your life force. It is the fuel required to travel there. Everyone carries the intention for a richer, more peaceful life. But where do the vast majority of people rest their daily attention?
Usually on their problems.
Exactly. They rest it firmly and obsessively on the heavy void of what is missing. They intend for wealth, but their moment-to-moment attention is hyper-focused on the unpaid bills, the rising cost of groceries, the lack of immediate opportunities, and the unfairness of the economy.
And where your attention goes, your energy centralizes.
And what you centralize, you materialize.
You cannot intend for the dawn while your attention is perpetually locked onto the darkness. If your attention is on the lack of money, you are projecting a frequency of lack, regardless of what your vision board says. That makes total mechanistic sense.
It is pure physics.
Now, I want to add an observation regarding the seventh and final pillar, which is conviction. When I think about conviction, I don't think about shouting from a stage. I think about the purest, quietest distillation of self-trust. It is the unwavering belief in your own word.
That is a beautiful definition.
But I look at everyday life, and I wonder about the damage we do to ourselves in secret. If we continuously betray the quiet, minor promises we make to ourselves, like telling ourselves we will wake up an hour earlier to exercise, or we will finally sit down to outline that creative project.
And then the alarm goes off.
And then the alarm goes off, and we immediately hit the snooze button or turn on a distraction. If we constantly erode that baseline self-trust in private, how can we possibly summon the monumental conviction required to command an entirely new reality into existence?
That is a deeply challenging and entirely accurate observation. Conviction is the bedrock upon which frequency is built. Your subconscious mind functions much like a meticulous ledger.
The ledger, like an accountant.
Yes, it tracks every promise you make and every promise you break. If your subconscious learns that your word means absolutely nothing because you abandon your own minor commitments on a daily basis, it will simply not believe you when you attempt to assert a new, abundant state of consciousness.
So our own mind calls our bluff.
Exactly. You are attempting to command reality with a voice that has voluntarily surrendered its authority. To rebuild conviction, you do not need to make massive leaps. You must simply begin keeping the smallest promises to yourself, thereby slowly restoring the sovereign power of your own mind.
We have to prove to our nervous system that when we declare something, it happens.
Even if it is just making the bed.
And I imagine part of restoring that sovereign power means we have to actively evict the limiting beliefs we've inherited from our culture, especially the ones that romanticize the struggle.
Yes, there is a deeply ingrained, toxic trap in modern society, particularly among those who consider themselves highly moral or profoundly hardworking.
The idea that suffering makes you noble.
Precisely. It is the pervasive belief that suffering is a mandatory prerequisite for worthiness. The idea that blood, sweat, agonizing sacrifice, and constant stress are the only valid currencies the universe accepts in exchange for abundance. This is an entirely self-imposed cage.
It really is. We wear exhaustion like a badge of honor.
And when you hold the belief that wealth must be grueling, you broadcast a frequency of grueling hardship. Reality, serving as the faithful mirror, will dutifully ensure that every single resource you acquire is thickly coated in exhaustion and friction.
Because that is what we expect.
Right. You have to understand a fundamental universal law. The cosmos does not require your suffering. Your suffering adds zero value to the energetic exchange.
I love how this dismantles the martyr complex. And that realization forces a transition into one of the most paradigm-shattering concepts in our exploration today. If we want to change our frequency, we have to look at how we actually physically interact with resources in the daily world.
The mechanics of exchange.
Yeah, we have to examine the traditional, deeply societal concept of spending. The very vocabulary we use is problematic. The word spending inherently implies a permanent, painful loss. When I spend a resource, it is gone. It has permanently left my possession and diminished my total value.
That vocabulary reinforces the ultimate illusion of the physical realm. The concept of spending binds human consciousness to an illusion of strict separation and polarity.
Like we are all isolated.
Right. It operates on the false premise that you are an isolated island, completely cut off from the mainland, and when a resource leaves your shore, your island shrinks. To elevate our foundational frequency, we must completely transcend this archaic vocabulary and view the movement of all resources as circulation.
Circulation, like blood moving through a healthy body. It doesn't leave the body when it travels from the heart to the hand. It just moves to a different region to sustain the whole organism.
That is exactly the right metaphor. Adopting this requires a massive metaphysical expansion of our worldview. We must introduce the principle of universal unity into our daily transactions.
How does that look in practice?
Well, all existence, every single person walking the street, every establishment, stems from a singular unified field of consciousness. We are all individual waves rising out of the exact same infinite ocean.
Okay, I'm following you.
Therefore, when a resource is transferred to another individual, whether it is a barista handing you a coffee, a tailor measuring you for a suit, or a stranger receiving a donation, that resource is not leaving you. It is merely being passed to another reflection of yourself within the unified field.
Let's put some gritty sensory reality to this metaphysical concept. Let's look at the evolutionary biology of hoarding versus circulating. I'm picturing a scenario. You are in a quiet, softly lit diner late at night.
Okay, set it and see.
The rain is sliding down the glass window pane in heavy streaks. The smell of old, burnt coffee and fried food hangs in the damp air. The waitress, who looks like she's been on her feet for an agonizingly long shift, walks over and places the check on your table. You pull out your wallet.
A very standard transaction.
Exactly. Describe the sensory details of leaving a gratuity in that exact moment. You hear the sharp clinking of the coins against the ceramic plate. You feel the physical friction of sliding a crisp paper bill across the sticky Formica table. Under the old paradigm of spending, what is happening internally, biologically, in that moment of exchange?
Under the old paradigm of permanent loss, as your fingers reluctantly release that paper bill, there is a cascade of stress responses, a microcontraction of fear, a tightened jaw, a subtle spike in cortisol as your brain enters a low-level threat state.
Because my brain thinks I am losing a piece of my safety.
Yes. Your mind is clouded by the thought, I have less now, this portion of my safety is gone. In a biological threat state, your peripheral vision literally narrows. You become psychologically and biologically incapable of spotting new opportunities because your nervous system is obsessing over the perceived loss.
So giving money away in fear actually hurts us energetically.
Tremendously. When you release that resource with a frequency of fear and lack, you project a heavy, dark resonance onto the medium of the transaction itself. You are essentially broadcasting to the universe, I'm operating in a state of loss and vulnerability.
And the universe says, okay, more loss coming right up.
Exactly. It responds by ensuring that loss is maintained, the energetic current is abruptly broken, the resource stays away.
Let me push back, or at least clarify, because people have to pay their bills. We can't just avoid transactions. How do we practically shift that late-night diner transaction out of the threat state and into the frequency of circulation?
You don't avoid the transaction. You fundamentally change the internal temperature of the act.
Yeah.
As you slide that bill across the sticky Formica table, you do not view the tired waitress as a separate, competing entity extracting your hard-earned wealth.
Right, she is part of the same whole.
Yes. You view her as an extension of the universal whole, another vital organ in the body you both share. You release the resource with a wash of genuine warmth, enthusiasm, and profound, unshakable confidence. You intentionally feel a quiet joy in the act of circulating energy.
It is a totally different.
Completely different. When you do this, you establish an unbreakable magnetic current. You're acting from a frequency of infinite supply. And by maintaining that expansive frequency, you magnetically guarantee the return of that resource, often multiplied, back into your own experience.
Because you have proven you are a clear conduit for circulation, not a stagnant reservoir.
Exactly.
I see the distinction. It isn't the physical magnitude that leaves your hand that matters. It is the emotional frequency that accompanies the release. You could leave a massive, generous gratuity, but if you do it with a clenched jaw, a spike of cortisol, and a heavy feeling of resentment, you are still projecting profound scarcity.
Absolutely true.
But you could leave a much more modest amount with sheer joy and a sense of abundance, and you are projecting immense wealth.
Precisely. Reality responds exclusively to the emotional signature, never to the physical arithmetic.
This connects so deeply to where we look for our safety in life. Because if we are panicked about circulating resources, it means we fundamentally believe the numbers in our bank account or our specific job title serve as our actual fortress against the chaos of the world.
Which is a very fragile fortress.
It really is. I want to unpack the illusion of the external fortress. We search desperately for peace and safety in external markers. We tell ourselves, if I just get this senior job title, if I break into this lucrative industry, if my bank account swells to this specific magical threshold, then I will finally be able to exhale. Then I will finally be safe.
Searching for lasting security in external markers is an act of profound psychological self-sabotage. It is entirely backwards. The physical plane, by its very inherent nature, is a landscape of perpetual impermanence.
Nothing stays the same forever.
Right. Everything in the physical world is subject to decay, shifting economic tides, unforeseen disruptions, and sudden alteration.
So when we attribute the source of our internal peace to an external structure, we are essentially turning those fragile structures into false idols. We are worshiping at the altar of things that can be taken away.
Yes. You are voluntarily placing your sovereign power into the hands of an illusion. If you grant your employer, your specific clients, or the current state of your investments the exclusive power to provide your internal security, you are simultaneously granting reality the power to abruptly revoke that security without your permission.
That is terrifying, honestly.
It is. If reality is your only anchor, and reality inevitably shifts, you will be violently thrown into the storm. True, unshakable wealth cannot be stored in a vault.
It has to be built inside.
It must be actively gathered and meticulously stored within. It must be built as a sanctuary of elevated inner tranquility and serenity, a fortress constructed entirely independently of the outside weather.
I like to use an analogy for this. Relying on external reality for peace is like trying to fix a broken, disconnected Wi-Fi router by repainting the outside of your laptop.
Oh, that is brilliant.
Right. It might look shiny and new for a brief moment, but you are addressing the completely wrong layer of the technology. The underlying connection is still broken. True security is going into the foundational code of your own operating system and repairing the signal at its source.
That modern analogy highlights the absurdity of our approach. We constantly repaint the laptop while ignoring the signal.
But here's the question that I think trips everyone up. It is the greatest stumbling block of personal development. If reality is always trailing behind us, if the physical world is the absolute last domino to fall in the cascade, why do we insist on waiting for the physical scenery to change before we grant ourselves permission to feel relief?
Because human beings have been deeply conditioned to demand proof from the mirror before we are willing to smile.
Demand proof from the mirror.
Yes. Imagine standing in front of a mirror with a deep frown on your face, crossing your arms and declaring, "Once my reflection smiles at me, then I will finally allow myself to feel happy."
Which is physically impossible.
Exactly. It is fundamental misunderstanding of the physics of reflection. You must occupy the energetic destination long before the physical environment confirms your arrival. Your internal state must intensely, genuinely, and emotionally experience the profound peace of abundance first.
We have to feel the relief right now.
You must feel the physical relief, the expansion in your chest, the joy of arrival right now amidst your current unresolved circumstances. Only when that internal frequency is stabilized and maintained will the universe quietly, systematically reconfigure the external architecture to match your new baseline.
You absolutely have to smile first and then the mirror eventually catches up. That is so radically counterintuitive to how human biology is wired to assess threats, but so beautifully logical when you understand the mechanics of the cascade.
It changes everything once it clicks.
And if we apply this truth to the place where we spend a monumental span of our waking hours, our daily work, We really run into a massive wall of cultural conditioning. We have to aggressively alter our societal perception of daily labor.
We must. Because right now, the collective frequency projected onto the concept of work is incredibly toxic. Viewing daily labor as a form of indentured servitude or as an oppressive, soul-crushing machinery designed to extract our life force is a massive energetic error.
How does that affect our frequency?
Well, when you perceive your job through that lens of resentment, you are projecting a dark, heavy, repulsive frequency directly onto the very instrument through which abundance is currently meant to flow to you.
Let's paint a vivid picture of this dynamic. Think about the sensory detail of a typical, difficult morning. It is pitch black outside. The air is cold. Suddenly there is the shrill, piercing, mechanical sound of an early morning alarm clock shattering the silence.
Ugh, everyone knows that sound.
For an overwhelming majority of people, the immediate visceral reaction to that sound is a heavy, leaden sigh of dread, a tightening of the stomach, a wave of exhaustion before their feet even hit the floor. How do we take that exact same physical scenario, that exact same shrill sound, and completely reframe it? How do we train our nervous system to hear it not as a prison siren calling us to the yard, but as the ringing of a starting bell for an instrument of circulation?
You have to mentally separate the physical motions of the job from the spiritual conduit it represents. For this current moment in your timeline, your job is simply the neutral medium through which the universe is delivering resources to you.
So it is just a pipe.
Think of it as a pipe connecting you to a reservoir. If your daily perception of that pipe is filled with hatred, dread, and bitter complaint, you're effectively clogging the pipe with thick, energetic sludge.
So reframing the alarm clock.
Reframing the alarm clock means waking up and actively recognizing, this specific job is not my master. It does not define my ultimate worth. It is simply a temporary, completely neutral conduit. I am intentionally using this conduit to pay myself, to sustain my physical vessel, and to participate in the circulation of energy.
Okay, I am going to throw a flag on the play here because I know what you are saying sounds beautiful in theory, but I want to advocate for the person listening right now. What if a listener is sitting in their car at this exact moment, parked outside a concrete building they despise, feeling physically and mentally trapped in a deeply uninspiring, perhaps even hostile or systemically unfair environment?
That is a very real situation for many people.
If someone is facing massive systemic economic friction, telling them their inner frequency is the only issue feels not only slightly dismissive, but immensely frustrating. How do they mentally flip that switch without just succumbing to a hollow, delusional brand of toxic positivity? We can't just plaster a fake smile on and pretend a terrible, abusive job is a wonderful blessing.
That is a crucial distinction, and I'm so glad you brought it up. It is absolutely not about forcing a false plastic love for mundane, grueling, or unfair tasks. It is not about gaslighting your own nervous system into believing a hostile environment is a tropical paradise.
Because our nervous system knows we are lying.
Exactly. And it is certainly not about denying the reality of systemic friction. Systemic issues are the heavy weather patterns of the physical plane. But frequency is how you build a ship capable of navigating out of that weather.
Okay, I like that distinction. So what is the actual practice?
The practice is about honoring the sovereign state of being you carry into the task. You must detach your internal sanctuary from the external activity. You can perform a mind-numbing data entry task or calmly de-escalate a deeply difficult customer while internally maintaining a fortress of absolute peace, neutrality, and subtle joy.
You protect your inner world.
You recognize that the physical action does not dictate your frequency unless you grant it permission to do so. By maintaining internal peace, regardless of the frustrating physical motions or the systemic noise around you, you cleanse the conduit. You remove your own internal resistance to the flow.
And what happens when the conduit is cleansed?
When the conduit is cleansed of the sludge of your personal resentment, you allow a far greater magnitude of energy to flow towards you, which eventually provides the resources and the inspiration to leave that hostile environment entirely.
That reframes a lot. You are essentially becoming untriggerable by the mundane. You are saying, I will perform this physical task because it serves my current circulation, but I will absolutely not let this task dictate my vibratory baseline.
Precisely. You remain the master of your frequency.
Which perfectly sets us up for the final, highly actionable concept of our journey today. How do we practically, actively elevate that vibratory baseline in our everyday, messy lives? Because none of us can just meditate continuously. We have to interact with the world, make decisions, and buy things. And the most tangible answer seems to lie in the intentional selection of quality.
Yes. Upgrading these seemingly insignificant choices we make in our daily physical environment fundamentally alters our foundational frequency. It is a powerful tactile method to train your subconscious mind through physical evidence.
By physical evidence, you mean the things we surround ourselves with.
Right. By selectively choosing a higher tier of quality when you are capable of doing so, you are actively establishing a new vibratory baseline of what is acceptable in your existence. You're setting a new floor.
How does that actually work on a mechanistic level? Are we just talking about the superficial psychology of feeling fancy or indulging in retail therapy?
Oh no, it is far deeper than superficial psychology. It is the physics of resonance. Quality inherently carries its own intense, elevated resonance. When an object is crafted with genuine care, with superior materials, with higher attention from its creator, it holds a fundamentally different energetic frequency than something mass-produced, cheap, and thoughtless.
So the objects themselves carry a frequency.
They do. When you bring that higher resonance into your personal orbit and physically interact with it, it forces a recalibration of your internal standard. You are feeding your nervous system tangible data that says, I am worthy of an elevated experience.
And then what happens?
Once your internal standard rigidly refuses to accept the bare minimum, the external world loses its ability to enforce the bare minimum upon you.
I have a concrete, almost ridiculously simple real-life example for this, but it highlights the profound impact. Let's look at the absolute simplest, most everyday tool imaginable.
A pen. Perfect. Let's hear it.
Think about sitting at your desk at work. You are taking important notes using a cheap, disposable plastic pen. Maybe it's one of those promotional bank pens you accidentally hoarded in a drawer. The plastic cap is all chewed up. The ink skips every third letter. The plastic feels flimsy, hollow, and rough against your fingers.
We all have a dozen of those lying around.
Right. It is purely utilitarian, and it feels fundamentally cheap. Now, imagine the simple, intentional act of upgrading that tool, deciding to purchase a beautifully weighted, smooth-flowing writing instrument. Maybe it is made of cool brushed steel or heavy brass. When you pick it up, it has a satisfying heft to it. The ink glides effortlessly onto the paper without you having to press down and strain your wrist.
That constant tactile difference is an ongoing conversation with your biology.
Right. Every single day, multiple times a day, when you sit down at your desk and your fingers touch the cool, substantial metal of that pen, you are receiving a constant physical, sensory reminder. It is a microtransmission directly to your nervous system that says, I interact with quality. My thoughts and my words are worth the beautiful instrument. I am worthy of an elevated baseline.
Yes.
It isn't about showing off the pen to a coworker. It is an intimate, closed-loop conversation between you and your own subconscious.
That example is vital because it clearly separates this concept from the trap of reckless extravagance.
Yes.
This is not a call to drain your savings to buy designer clothes to impress strangers. That is an action rooted in the frequency of insecurity.
Exactly. That is just trying to fix the mirror again.
Right. This is a strategic, deeply personal, metaphysical realignment. It is about actively treating yourself to the reality you wish to inhabit in whatever small, manageable ways you can right now. You are leaving sensory breadcrumbs for your subconscious mind to follow.
Sensory breadcrumbs. I love that.
When you consistently choose to align with quality, whether it is the solid pen you write with, the fresh ingredients you cook with, or the quiet moment you take to drink your morning coffee from a heavy ceramic mug instead of a flimsy paper cup, you are cementing a new frequency. Treat yourself to the reality you wish to inhabit, and the passage of eras will see that reality slowly, inevitably, harden into permanence around you.
That is a profound place to land. It brings this entire massive journey full circle. We are essentially learning the mechanics of how to be the thermostat rather than just shivering in the cold and complaining about the draft. Let's take a moment for a broader reflection on everything we've explored today.
It has been quite a journey.
It really has. We have detailed a fundamental shift in how to exist in the world. We must move away from the exhausting narrative that views us as helpless passengers, strapped tightly into the back seat of a rigid, mechanical, unforgiving universe, hoping the driver takes us somewhere nice.
We must completely shed the victimhood of the physical plane. We awaken to the profound realization that we are not the subjects of reality, we are the unseen architects of the cosmos.
We are the architects.
Yes. Our human potential is not defined by our physical strength, our sheer force of will, or our capacity to endure suffering. Our potential is absolutely boundless once we stop bloodying our knuckles, trying to desperately chisel away at the frozen ice of reality.
The ice is already frozen, the shape is set.
Exactly. The work is not out there in the physical world. The work is entirely within. Our sole focus, our ultimate responsibility, must shift to purely and intentionally altering the radiant ambient temperature of our own inner waters.
So as you, the listener, go about the rest of your day today, whether you are gripping the steering wheel on your commute or preparing a meal or sitting at that desk with your newly upgraded pen, I want to leave you with a lingering, provocative thought to mull over. We established at the very beginning of this exploration that the physical world is the absolute end of the line. It is the final residue of your frequency.
The very last domino.
Yes, so if every single physical object, circumstance, and relationship surrounding you at this exact breathing moment is nothing more than a frozen echo of who you used to be internally, what entirely new, breathtaking landscape are you quietly freezing into existence right now?